The night did not break with noise. It shattered. Elara Ross woke to a sound that seemed too large for her small cabin, a boom that bent the walls and hurled her from her cot. At first she thought it was thunder, but thunder didn't smell like burning pitch. Thunder didn't scream. She pushed herself up on trembling elbows. Heat licked at the floorboards beneath her palms. Through the cracks in the shutters, a flash of orange lit the room like a furnace door swinging open. "Grandma," she called, her voice hoarse, small. No answer. The second blast threw dust from the rafters. Something heavy slammed outside the cabin, and shouts, men's voices, tore through the air, cold and merciless. Ilara stumbled toward the door, half blind, lungs filling with smoke. The handle burned her skin when she touched it. "Grandma," she tried again. Louder this time. Just as her fingers curled around the latch, a beam above her groaned, cracked, and dropped like a striking hammer. She flung herself sideways, but it clipped her thigh, tearing pain up her leg so sharp she tasted blood. She hit the floor hard. The world dimmed, tunneled, shrank to a pinprick of color. Orange. Everywhere. Orange. When she opened her eyes again, everything was quiet except the hungry hiss of dying flames. She dragged herself outside. Her leg no longer felt like hers, just heat and numbness and a wrong angle she didn't dare look at. Her village, Willow Bend, lay in ruins. Homes that once smelled of bread and cedar now smoldered like burnt offerings. People she had shared meals with lay twisted among the debris, faces gray beneath soot. Ilara pressed a fist to her mouth to stop the sob that rose inside her chest, threatening to rip her open. The wind carried a different sound now, metal on leather, footsteps crunching through charred earth. Men moved among the wreckage, shadowy shapes illuminated by the remaining flames. Coats long and dark, badges she had never seen before. Not bandits, worse, paid men. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't die here. She clawed at the ground, pulling herself away from the carnage, toward the hills rising like silent witnesses beyond the settlement. She didn't know where she meant to go, didn't think she could make it even halfway, but forward was the only direction left that wasn't filled with corpses. Every inch she crawled felt stolen. Her palms blistered on scorched soil. Smoke scraped her lungs raw. Her vision wavered like a mirage, but she held on to the leather cord around her neck. Beneath her fingers rested the smooth weight of a crescent-shaped stone carved by an old Apache woman who once traded with her grandmother. For balance, the woman had said, for walking between worlds. Ilara had never understood that, not until now. The hills seemed impossibly far, but she kept moving, over collapsed fences, past the well where laughter once echoed, past the swing carved from rope and pine that she'd helped hang for the neighbor's boy. Past her own mangled cabin, the roof collapsed in like a broken rib cage. She crawled until she no longer felt her hands or her legs, until her breath sounded like a dying bellows, until the sky above her paled from black to bruised blue. Dawn crept over the ridge, revealing a valley she no longer recognized. When her strength finally betrayed her, she collapsed onto soot-coated earth, her cheek pressed against grit. The world tilted, dimmed, blinked. She thought she heard footsteps, soft ones this time, measured, careful. A shadow moved across her fading vision, tall, wrapped in earth-colored cloth, eyes dark and steady. He stood just a few strides away, still as the stones behind him, watching her. She tried to speak. Only a croak escaped. Her fingers tightened around the pendant. The man's gaze flicked to it, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity, not alarm, recognition, a memory she did not share. He stepped closer, and the gravel beneath his boots whispered. Ilara forced her eyes open one last time, meeting his. "If you are death," she thought weakly. At least you have a kind face." But death did not kneel beside her. This man did. He touched the canteen at his belt, opened it, and lifted her head gently. Water touched her lips, a mercy so unexpected she nearly wept. "You should not be here," he said quietly, his voice like low thunder rolling across stone. She tried to answer, but darkness pressed in again. The last thing she felt was the strength of his arms as he lifted her from the ashes. And for the first time since the world burned, Alara stopped fighting sleep. Alara floated in and out of consciousness as the stranger carried her. Sometimes the sky appeared above her, soft streaks of dawn through drifting ash. Sometimes she saw only the steady rise and fall of his chest as her cheek rested against it. The scent of him, pine resin, sweat, and desert stone, pulled her back from the edge of oblivion each time her mind slipped away. She didn't know how long he walked, hours, maybe, or a lifetime. When she woke fully, she lay on a bed of woven hides. Cool air brushed her cheeks. Shadows rippled along the walls, soft, uneven lines of a stone shelter carved into the canyon wall. Sunlight filtered in through a narrow opening above, warm but gentle. Her leg throbbed in waves, but it was bandaged tight. The bleeding stopped. A splint ran along the length of her thigh, held in place with strips of leather. A bowl of crushed herbs sat beside her, their scent bitter and sharp. He had treated her wounds. Her eyes opened wider. "Where is Grandma?" The memory struck hard enough to steal her breath. The smoke, the missing scream, the empty porch. Her heart hammered painfully. Before panic overtook her, soft footsteps approached. The man entered the shelter with the same quiet presence he carried in the valley, like the earth made room for him without needing to be asked. He wore his dark hair tied back, his skin sun-browned and marked with faint scars that looked earned rather than inflicted. His clothing was simple, a deer-hide coat softened with age, a knife sheathed at his hip, and around his neck, a thin braid of sage. He carried a wooden bowl, steam curled from it. "You're awake," he said, voice steady, not surprised, not relieved. Simply truth. Alara tried to sit, wincing as pain shot up her spine. He was beside her in an instant, one hand bracing her shoulder, the other sliding a folded hide behind her back so she could lean upright. "Slow," he murmured. "Your leg is broken." Her mouth felt dry. Who are you?" He set the bowl beside her before answering. "My name is Kyle." It suited him, sharp edges wrapped in calm. Why did you save me?" she whispered. Kale didn't look away or shift uncomfortably as others might. Instead, he held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "You were alive," he said simply. "And you wore that." His chin dipped toward the pendant resting at her chest. The crescent stone glowed faintly in the sunbeam, warm against her skin. Alara lifted it, fingers trembling. "A gift from an old woman who traded with us. She said it reminded her of someone she once knew." Kale's eyes softened, but with a sadness she didn't understand. "She gave you more than a memory," he said quietly. "She gave you protection. It is a symbol of her family." Alara swallowed. "I didn't know." She would not have given it lightly. Their eyes met, hers full of exhaustion and fear, his full of storms held barely at bay. Kyle reached for the bowl again and handed it to her. "Drink." She hesitated. "Is it medicine?" "Herbs for pain and strength." She lifted the bowl to her lips. The liquid was bitter, earthy, but the warmth spread through her chest, calming her shaking hands. Only once she had finished did Kale sit beside the fire pit, feeding small glowing coals with pinches of dried brush. Silence curled around them like a blanket. Not uncomfortable, simply foreign. Alara finally spoke, voice breaking around the truth she feared. "There were men. in long coats, badges that weren't from around here. They, they burned everything. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. I don't know if anyone survived. Kyle's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. And my grandmother, her voice splintered. I didn't see her. I tried to reach her, but Kyle looked at her sharply. Your grandmother. Alara froze. You saw her? His next words knocked the breath from her lungs. She lives. Her vision blurred. Where? Resting. In another shelter higher in the canyon. Weak, but alive. The smoke took her breath, and she is older. But she called your name, even while unconscious. Alara sobbed, pure relief, raw and shaking. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears poured freely. Kale waited. He did not touch her, but the space between them warmed. When she could speak again, her voice was barely air. Thank you. Kale's gaze drifted to the canyon entrance, where fading daylight painted the rocks gold. I did what was right. But you are not safe yet. Fear pricked her skin. Those men, they'll come? They hunt land, not people, Kyle said. But anyone who saw them, anyone who lived, they may not want answers. Alara shivered. What do we do? Kale stood slowly, as if decisions weighed more than weapons. We keep you hidden, and when you can walk, we find a place where fire does not follow. He looked at her then, not just as a wounded girl, but as someone fate had thrown into his path for a reason neither of them yet understood. Rest, he said softly. Tomorrow, everything changes. And though the night outside grew cold, Alara felt, for the first time since her world burned, a small spark of safety bloom in her chest. Alara woke to the sound of wind brushing across the canyon walls, like a giant exhaling. The light inside the shelter had shifted to a pale gold, warming the rough stone and casting long shadows from the bundles of herbs hanging overhead. Someone had left a small cup of water by her side, and when she tried to sit up, the splint against her leg reminded her sharply of reality. Pain flared, but it was less sharp than the night before. She wasn't sure if that was Kyle's medicine or simply hope leaking into her bones. Outside the opening of the shelter, voices murmured, soft, indistinct, but undeniably human. Alara's heart thudded. She pushed the hide blanket aside and braced herself with her arms, dragging herself closer to the doorway. Her muscles trembled with effort. Kyle's silhouette appeared first. He carried a basket of wild roots in one hand and a small clay pot in the other. With him was an older woman, hair silver, back bent with years but eyes keen and bright. When she saw Alara, the older woman clicked her tongue. She tries to walk when she cannot even stand, the woman muttered. Kyle hid a smile, a stubborn one. Alara blinked. Who is she? The old woman stepped forward, her movement slow but sure. She studied Alara's face, tracing her with eyes as sharp as arrowheads. I am Nayeli, she said. I helped your grandmother through the night. Alara's breath caught. Is she? Can I see her? Nayeli raised a hand. Later. She needs stillness, not excitement. Her breath is thin, like smoke in the wind. Alara swallowed. Thank you for helping her. Nayeli dipped her head once, accepting gratitude without absorbing it. She called your name more than once. Even in dreams, she looks for you. Warmth bloomed in Alara's chest like a fragile flower pushing through ash. Kale stepped inside, setting the basket of roots near the fire pit. You need food, he said, and movement. Too much rest is also dangerous. Movement? Alara eyed her leg doubtfully. But Kale wasn't asking her to walk. He carried the clay pot to her and offered a wooden spoon. Eat, he urged. It will strengthen you. The stew was earthy, thick, and surprisingly soothing. As she ate, Kale crouched beside her. "We need to leave the canyon by tomorrow," he said. "The smoke from the village has drawn attention." Alara's throat tightened. "Will they find us?" "If they look closely enough," he said. "But they do not know these paths." "We will have a chance." Nayeli clicked her tongue again. "A small chance, but better than none." Alara's hand trembled around the spoon. "I can't walk." Kyle met her eyes. "Then I will carry you. And when you can walk, I will teach you how to move without being seen." His confidence did not erase her fear, but it steadied something inside her. Hours later, when the sun reached its peak, Nayeli led Alara, very slowly, to the highest shelter where her grandmother rested. Kyle lifted her gently, carrying her as if she weighed no more than a breath. For a moment, Alara felt the canyon expand below her, rugged and beautiful, like a hidden world carved out of time. Inside the small alcove, her grandmother lay wrapped in blankets, her chest rising and falling with shallow but steady breaths. Her face was pale beneath streaks of soot, but her lips curved faintly when Alara whispered her name. "Grandma, I'm here." The old woman's eyelids quivered open. Her gaze wavered but found Alara with a clarity that made tears spill instantly down Alara's cheeks. "My brave girl," her grandmother rasped. "You lived." Alara nearly broke at those words. She lowered her head onto her grandmother's chest, listening to the faint heartbeat beneath her ear. Kyle stepped back respectfully, giving them space. Nayeli placed a hand on his arm. "We leave at dawn," she said quietly. "The desert will hide our tracks better than stone." Kyle nodded. When the sun lowered into evening, Ilara and Kyle walked, or rather he guided her, back to the lower shelter. The sky above the canyon turned violet, stars emerging like shy eyes. As they settled near the fading firelight, Ilara looked at Kyle. Really looked. He carried weariness in his shoulders, scars across his arms, shadows behind his eyes, but also steadiness, a quiet patience she had never encountered before. "Why did you help us?" she asked softly. Kale hesitated, tracing a line in the dust beside him with one finger. "There was a time when I needed help," he said, "and none came." Alara's heart clenched. "I'm sorry." He looked up. "Don't be. Pain teaches us the shape of others' suffering." Something inside her shifted, slowly, gently, like a compass turning toward a new north. That night, as she fell asleep beneath the warm glow of embers, she realized something. The world she knew was gone. But maybe, just maybe, something else was beginning. Dawn painted the canyon in shades of rose and ember when Kyle woke Ilara with a gentle touch on her shoulder. The air was cold enough to sting her skin, and the first thing she noticed was the quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "It's time," Kyle said softly. Ilara nodded, pushing herself upright. Her leg throbbed with each movement, but she gritted her teeth. Kyle helped her dress in a light doe-skin cloak that still smelled faintly of sage. Her grandmother rested a few feet away, wrapped snugly in blankets, her breathing steadier than the day before. Nayeli knelt beside the older woman, pressing herbs into a cloth pouch. "For her lungs," she murmured. "Boil it when you stop tonight." Ilara took the pouch with shaking fingers. "Thank you." "No thanks," Nayeli replied, smoothing the blankets. "Just prayers." By the time the sun crested the canyon rim, Kale had secured 2 horses, small, hardy desert ponies with dark stripes along their legs. He lifted Ilara's grandmother first, laying her gently across a padded saddle. Then he turned to Ilara. "You'll ride with me," he said. Her cheeks warmed despite the cold. I don't want to slow you down." His expression softened in a way she couldn't read. "You won't." He mounted, then reached for her with both hands. Alara hesitated only a heartbeat before allowing him to lift her. His arms were steady, his movements careful. She settled in front of him, his chest warm against her back, his arm braced securely around her waist. She felt safe, frighteningly safe. They left the canyon as the first true rays of sunlight spilled over the horizon, washing the desert in gold. The path was narrow, flanked by red stone pillars that rose like ancient guardians. Alara watched the ground move beneath them, sand shifting in soft waves. "How far must we go?" she asked. "Far enough that no one will know where you came from," Kyle said. "Far enough that those who burned your home won't follow." Alara's eyes dropped. The ache in her chest pulsed at the memory of her village. The laughter, the quiet evenings, the faces she would never see again. Kyle felt the shift in her posture. "Do not look back," he murmured. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because grief is a heavy horse," he said, "and you cannot ride two at once." His words struck something deep inside her, something raw and fragile. She swallowed hard. By midday, heat shimmered across the sand. Kale stopped at a cluster of boulders casting a narrow ribbon of shade. He slid from the horse first, then helped Alara down. She bit her lip as her injured leg brushed the ground, a sharp flare of pain shooting upward. Kale steadied her instantly. "Slow," he murmured. "I'm trying," she whispered. His gaze lingered on her face, concern threading through his features, before he stepped away to tend to her grandmother. Alara watched him lift her gently, offering water in small sips, adjusting the blankets with the same care he gave every wounded thing. "You're good with her," Alara said softly when he returned. Kyle shrugged. "Elders deserve respect." "And you?" His brow furrowed. "What about me?" "You deserve it too." He blinked, caught off guard, as if no one had said such words to him in years. They continued through the afternoon, the desert changing shape around them, fields of scrub brush giving way to whispering dunes, then to dry riverbeds etched with history. The wind picked up, blowing grit across their path. Alara shielded her face with her sleeve. Kale tightened his grip around her waist. Sandstorm coming. Panic crawled up her spine. How bad? Bad enough that we must reach shelter. He urged the horses into a steady trot. The wind howled louder like a beast waking. Sand swept across the ground in wild spirals. Alara clung to the saddle, her heart pounding. Ahead, a ruined relay station jutted from the desert like a half-buried skeleton, its adobe walls cracked but still standing. They reached it moments before the storm crashed over them. Kyle dismounted and lifted Alara quickly, ushering her through the heavy wooden door. Niley arrived moments later with Alara's grandmother in her arms. The wind raged outside, battering the walls, filling cracks with clouds of sand. Inside, shadows danced across the dim interior. Kyle secured the doorway with a fallen beam, then built a small concealed fire in the hearth. Alara's grandmother shivered violently. "She needs warmth," Nayeli muttered. Kyle heated stones in the fire, wrapped them in cloth, and placed them around the old woman's body. Alara knelt beside her, whispering softly, fingers brushing her grandmother's cheek. "You're safe," she breathed. "We're together." A sound thundered outside, different from the storm, heavy, deliberate. Alara froze. Kale's head snapped up. "Footsteps," he said, voice low. Nayeli's eyes narrowed. "We are not alone." Ilara's pulse hammered in her ears. The wind roared. The door creaked. Kyle reached for his knife. And just like that, the desert wasn't the only danger waiting for them. The storm clawed at the adobe walls with a fury that made the whole structure tremble. Sand hissed through the cracks like whispered warnings. Cale stood motionless, knife glinting faintly in the dim firelight, his body poised, not tense but sharpened, like an arrow waiting for release. Ilara held her breath. Her grandmother slept fitfully beside her, Nayeli keeping a steady hand on the old woman's chest, murmuring prayers under her breath. Another thud echoed against the outer wall. A dragging sound followed, slow and heavy. Kai's voice was barely more than a breath. "Someone's out there." Ilara tried to swallow, but her throat was dry as sand. She could feel her pulse everywhere, her fingertips, her ears, her wounded leg. "What if it's one of the men who burned the village?" she whispered. Kyle didn't answer. That alone terrified her more than anything else. He moved silently toward the door, stepping between the wind's howls, placing his feet exactly where the floorboards didn't creak. He positioned himself along the wall beside the entry, knife raised but held low, ready. The dragging sound came again, closer now. Something brushed against the door, then a groan. Weak. Human. "Wait," Nayeli whispered sharply. "Not all who wander in storms do so by choice." Cale hesitated, a fraction of a second, but enough for Ilara to catch it. Compassion flickered across his features, quickly smothered by caution. A soft voice drifted through the door, barely audible over the wind. "Help. Please." Alara's eyes widened. That voice. It didn't sound like a soldier. It wasn't rough or commanding. It was trembling. Kyle narrowed his eyes, listening intently. "Open it," Nayeli urged. "No one lies with a voice that thin." But Kyle held up a hand. "Storms deceive. Desperate men more so." He leaned closer. "Who are you?" he called through the wooden planks. Silence. Then, "My name is Rowan," the voice cried, hoarse and cracking. "I'm lost. I can't. Please. I can't see." Ilara's breath caught. There was fear in that voice. Real fear. The kind no bandit could fake so perfectly. "Kyle," she whispered. "If we leave him out there, he'll die." Kyle's jaw clenched, torn. The storm wailed outside, peppering the adobe with violent bursts of sand. Another groan came from the other side of the door, then a collapse, a body hitting the ground. Ilara couldn't sit still, her hands dug into the dirt floor. "Kyle, please." For a moment, his eyes locked with hers. Something unspoken passed between them, trust, or maybe the beginning of it. With a low growl, he moved to the door, pulled the beam aside, and pushed it open just enough to slip out. Sand blasted into the room, stinging Ilara's face. Nayeli shielded the grandmother as Kyle disappeared into the storm. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, praying silently, clutching her pendant. Seconds stretched, then a shape reappeared, a silhouette leaning heavily on Kyle's shoulder. Kyle dragged the stranger inside, slamming the door shut with his foot as he heaved Rowan onto the floor. The man collapsed, coughing violently. Sand coated his clothes, his hair, even his eyelashes. He looked barely older than Ilara, sunburned, trembling, lips cracked from heat. Nayeli hurried to his side, pressing a water flask to his mouth. "Slow," she warned. "Small sips." Rowan drank like a man who hadn't tasted water in days. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes found Ilara's. They were a soft hazel, wide with fear and gratitude. "Thank you," he rasped. "You saved my life." Cale knelt beside him, expression unreadable. "What were you doing out there?" Rowan swallowed hard. "I was traveling with a caravan. We were attacked. I ran, got separated." "Attacked by who?" Cale's voice was low, controlled. Rowan shivered. "Men in long coats, with badges I didn't recognize." Ilara's heart lurched painfully. Cale's eyes hardened. The same. Rowan looked confused. Same, Nayeli answered for him. They burned her home. Rowan's expression twisted with shock. I'm so sorry. Alara's throat tightened. She managed a weak nod. Kyle turned to Nayeli. We move before sunset. The storm will pass by then. Nayeli nodded grimly. We cannot stay here now, not with those men roaming. Ilara looked between them, fear curling deep inside. The world outside this small shelter was growing darker, more dangerous. And now another life tangled with theirs. Rowan's fragile, frightened presence, a reminder of how many lives those men had shattered. Cale stood, gripping the knife handle until his knuckles whitened. We travel soon, he said, and we do not look back. The storm continued to rage, rattling the walls. Inside, for the first time since the fires of Willow Bend, Alara felt the strange weight of destiny beginning to gather, heavy, unstoppable, and somehow tied to all four of their lives. The storm died slowly, like a giant sinking to its knees. By late afternoon, the wind had quieted to a low moan, and the sun appeared as a pale disk behind thinning clouds of dust. Inside the relay station, the air hung heavy with tension. Kyle had spent the last hour sharpening his knife in silence, each stroke of stone against steel echoing like a heartbeat. Rowan sat propped against the wall, wrapped in a blanket Nayeli had given him. His face was drawn, his breath shallow but steadier than before. Ilara stayed close to her grandmother, who rested fitfully. Every so often her fingers twitched, reaching for Ilara's arm or the blankets, as if even in dreams she feared being left behind. Ilara brushed a curl of silver hair from her grandmother's forehead. We'll be okay, she whispered. Cale will keep us safe. She wasn't sure if she said it for her grandmother's sake or her own. Cale rose finally, dusting sand from his hands. The storm has passed enough to travel. Rowan looked up, worry tightening his brow. Travel where? There's nothing out here but sand and the men who want us dead. Cale's eyes darkened. There is always a direction that leads away from death. Is there a direction that leads to safety? Alara asked softly. Cale hesitated, then nodded once. There is a place I know. A long journey from here. A hidden settlement in the canyons beyond the divide. Few know the path. Fewer survive it. Nayeli gave him a long, hard stare. You would take them there? I would take them anywhere those men cannot follow. Alara shifted slightly, wincing as her splinted leg brushed the blankets. How far is it? 5 days, Kyle answered. If the horses hold. If your leg tolerates the movement. She swallowed. 5 days felt impossible. Yet there was no safer choice. Rowan sat forward. I'm not healed enough to travel 5 days. Cale's voice was gentle but firm. Healing or not, staying is death. Rowan looked away, shame tugging at his mouth. I know. Nayeli stood, her bones creaking softly. Then we go at dusk. The sand will be cool, and the sky our cover. Alara nodded and looked toward her grandmother. She'll make it, won't she? Nayeli didn't answer immediately. Her silence twisted something in Alara's chest. At last, the older woman spoke. Her spirit is strong, but spirits are not enough. We must help carry her until her breath returns fully. Cale knelt beside Ilara's grandmother, studying her with quiet intensity. I'll carry her, the entire way if needed. Ilara felt her throat close. Gratitude hit her so hard it hurt. Cale, you don't have to. I do, he said simply. Because we carry what we cannot afford to lose. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world stilled. The fading storm, the crumbling walls, even the dust in the air. Nayeli broke the moment with a clap of her hands. Pack what you have. We have little time. They worked quickly. Kyle gathered fire-starting stones, dried rations, and a shallow flask of oil. Nayeli wrapped herbs and powders into small leather bundles. Rowan managed to stand long enough to gather discarded cloth and rope from a collapsed storage shelf. Ilara helped as much as her injured leg allowed, folding blankets and tying them with trembling fingers. Every movement sent sparks of pain through her, but focusing on tasks kept her fear from strangling her. "Here," Kale said quietly, handing her a small piece of hardened fruit. "Eat." She shook her head. "Give it to Rowan or my grandmother." "Ilara." Kale's tone softened. "You must keep your strength. I know you want to give everything to them, but you cannot give what you do not have." Her eyes stung. She nodded and took a small bite. When the last light of day slipped through the cracks in the adobe wall, they were ready. Kyle stepped outside first, checking the horizon. "Clear," he murmured, "but we must move fast." He carried Ilara's grandmother with a gentleness that didn't match the hardness of his features. Rowan followed, leaning heavily on a walking stick Nayeli had fashioned. Nayeli herself walked with steady steps, her gaze sharp despite her age. Ilara mounted the horse with Kyle's help, settling into the saddle with a grimace. Pain flared, but she grit her teeth. She had survived worse. Kyle swung onto the horse behind her, one arm coming around her waist automatically, steady and protective. "You ready?" he asked, voice low. Ilara tilted her head back slightly, meeting his eyes. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I trust you." A flicker of warmth crossed his expression, quick but real. Then he clicked his tongue, guiding the horse forward into the endless stretch of desert. The world behind them faded into shadow. The world ahead waited in silent promise. And somewhere, deep inside Ilara's chest, hope flickered, fragile, trembling, but alive. The desert at night was not silent, it breathed. Cool air drifted over the dunes like whispered promises, carrying the scent of dry sage and distant storms. The moon, thin as a silver blade, hung low on the horizon. Under its faint glow, the small group moved slowly but steadily, their shadows stretching long across the sand. Ilara leaned back carefully against Kyle, her body shifting with the rhythm of the horse beneath them. Every jolt rattled her injured leg, but Kyle's arm around her waist kept her steady, kept her grounded. "You're shaking," he murmured, voice close enough that she felt it on her skin more than she heard it. She exhaled, a soft puff of white in the cold night. "The pain comes and goes." His hand tightened gently, not enough to hurt, enough to reassure. "Tell me when it becomes too much." Ilara nodded. But she knew she wouldn't. They needed distance, needed safety. Her pain was the smallest burden among them. Ahead, Nayeli walked beside Rowan, slow, deliberate steps, her hand hovering near his elbow in case he stumbled. Rowan's breathing was uneven, but the young man pushed on stubbornly. Every now and then he glanced back at Ilara as if checking she was still there. Hours passed before Kyle finally slowed their horse near a cluster of rock outcroppings. "We rest here until dawn." Nayeli nodded, too tired to reply. Rowan sank onto the sand, relief etched into every line of his face. Kyle dismounted first, lifting Ilara easily from the saddle. She fought the urge to apologize when her leg brushed him, and she gasped. "You don't need to hide the pain," he murmured. Ilara looked away, cheeks warming despite the cold. "I don't want to slow us down." "You won't." His tone held something like certainty, something like belief. He set her gently on a smooth, flat rock, then knelt beside her to check the bandages. His fingers brushed her skin lightly, sending a surprising warmth through her despite the night air. "Your swelling has gone down," he said. "How can you tell in the dark?" "I see with my hands," he replied simply, as if the answer required no explanation. Nayeli, busy setting blankets around Ilara's grandmother, snorted. He means he was taught properly, not like these caravan boys who faint at the sight of blood. Rowan groaned softly. I only fainted once. Twice, Nayeli corrected. For good reason, Rowan protested weakly. A man's leg was barely attached, and Kale cleared his throat pointedly. Even in the dim light, Alara could see the smirk he tried and failed to hide. Rowan huffed and lay back against a pack, defeated. Fine, I'm a sensitive soul. Alara laughed before she could stop herself. The sound felt strange, light, fragile, unexpected. It had been so long since she'd felt anything close to amusement. Kale looked at her, and something softened in his expression. It's good. Hearing you laugh. Her breath caught. She looked down quickly, pretending to adjust her blanket. Nayeli finished tending to Ilara's grandmother and settled near the fireless circle of stones. Sleep now. We walk again before the sun rises. Rowan groaned again, but didn't argue. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into sleep. Kyle stayed awake, sitting a few feet away, eyes scanning the horizon. The moon cast silver light over him, accentuating the angles of his face, the quiet strength in his posture. Alara watched him for a moment before whispering, "You never sleep." "I sleep when it's safe." "When is that?" Kale didn't look at her. "Never. If you're running from the kind of men we saw," she shivered. "Why are they doing this, Kyle? Why burn villages? Why chase survivors?" He was silent long enough that she feared he wouldn't answer. But finally, he said, voice low, "Because land is power, and people are obstacles." Alara felt her stomach twist. "Will they come for us again?" A long pause. "Yes," he admitted. "They will. They don't leave witnesses." Her breath trembled, but Kyle turned to her then, eyes steady as stone beneath the moonlight. "But they will not take you," he said. "Not while I breathe." Something inside her chest cracked open, an emotion too large, too bright, too terrifying to name. A warmth stole through her, contradicting the cold desert air. "Why? Why do you care what happens to me?" she whispered. Kale's gaze didn't waver, but the answer he gave was quiet, almost fragile. "Because," he said softly, "the moment I saw you crawl from the ashes, something in me refused to let your story end there." Ilara's heart beat so hard she feared he could hear it. The night around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, breath mingling, eyes locked. But before either of them could say anything else, a faint sound drifted across the sands. Footsteps, not Rowan's, not Nayeli's. From the darkness, from the dunes, westward. Kyle shot to his feet. Ilara's blood turned to ice. "They found us," he whispered, and the desert held its breath. Kyle moved like a shadow, silent, swift, and deadly focused. His hand slid to the knife strapped to his hip as he stepped forward, placing himself between Ilara and the approaching sound. The moonlight caught the blade, casting a cold shimmer across the sand. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Ilara's heart thudded painfully. Her hands trembled, gripping the blanket she'd been wrapped in. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body refused to move. Not without him. Not now. Nayeli stirred awake, eyes snapping open the moment she sensed Kale's shift in posture. In a heartbeat, she was crouched low, reaching for her bow, her fingers steady even though the air vibrated with danger. Rowan snorted in his sleep, unaware, until Nayeli kicked sand lightly at his leg. He jolted upright with a strangled gasp. "What? What's happening?" Nayeli silenced him with a sharp gesture. The sound grew closer, measured footsteps crunching through gravel, too deliberate to be an animal, too heavy to be wind. Ilara's breath shortened. Kyle stood unmoving, a statue carved from night. Then, a faint glint of steel caught the moonlight from behind a boulder 20 paces away. They were not alone. A man stepped into view. He wore a dark long coat, dust-stained and torn at the hem. A rifle rested over his shoulder, and his face, partly hidden beneath a wide hat, carried a cruel, impatient confidence. "Well," he drawled softly, "took me long enough to find your tracks." Alara's throat tightened. She knew that voice. She had heard it laughing during the fire, echoing through the smoke, ordering death like it was a game. Her fingers slapped over her mouth. Kyle didn't move. "You're far from your mercenary camp." The man shrugged casually. "A good hunter follows the scent, and I had business left unfinished." His gaze slid toward Alara. Her stomach dropped. Kyle's stance shifted, subtle but unmistakable, a readiness to strike. Nayeli notched an arrow. Rowan scrambled to his feet, grabbing a rock like it was a weapon worth wielding. The man ignored them. He focused on Alara with a smile that held no warmth. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, girl. Screaming survivors tend to complicate negotiations." Alara's breaths came too fast. She tried to speak, but her voice snagged in her throat. Kyle stepped forward. "If you want her, you go through me." The man laughed, slow, mocking, fondling the butt of his pistol. "Oh, trust me, desert boy. I am counting on it." He moved first. His hand darted toward his gun. Nayeli's arrow flew. Kyle lunged. The world erupted into motion. The arrow struck the man's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Kale tackled him hard, the two men crashing into the sand in a tangle of limbs and rage. The mercenary's pistol fired once. The bullet whistled past Rowan's ear, burying into the rock behind him. Alara screamed. Kale pinned the man down with raw force, but the mercenary was stronger than he looked. He slammed an elbow into Kale's ribs, grinning as Kale gasped. Nayeli rushed forward to help, but a second figure emerged from the shadows, a lookout, hidden until now. He charged at her, raising the butt of his rifle. "Nayeli!" Rowan yelled, throwing himself forward. His small frame collided with the attacker, knocking the rifle sideways. The weapon discharged, the shot gouging the earth inches from Alara's leg. "Nayeli, now!" Kale shouted, fighting to keep the mercenary's hands away from the pistol in the sand. Nayeli, recovering quickly, twisted her knife free and drove it into the second attacker's thigh. He howled and crumpled to the ground. Kyle wrestled with the mercenary, rolling through the dirt, fists connecting with bone. Sand exploded around them as they fought, breath harsh, muscles straining. The mercenary reached the pistol first. He cocked it, aiming straight at Kale's heart. "No!" Alara cried, stumbling to her feet despite the agony in her leg. She dove forward, grabbing the fallen rock Rowan had used earlier. Her fingers closed around the rough surface. She swung with everything she had. The rock cracked against the mercenary's hand, sending the pistol flying into the dark. The man roared in pain. Kale seized the moment. He flipped them, pressing the mercenary face down, knee at his spine, knife at his throat. "Enough," Kale growled. "It ends here." The man froze, panting, his breath ragged with fury. Alara's entire body trembled, adrenaline burning through her veins until she nearly collapsed. Kale reached her in 2 strides, catching her before she hit the ground. "You're hurt," he said, voice raw. "I'm fine," she whispered, even though she wasn't. "Kyle, you're bleeding." "It's nothing," Nayeli grunted. "It is absolutely something." Rowan tied the mercenary's hands with trembling fingers. Was that the only one?" "No," Kyle said darkly. "When one comes—" He glanced toward the horizon. "Others follow." Alara swallowed hard. "Then we run." Kyle looked down at her, sweat, fear, and courage mingling in her eyes. "No," he said softly. We don't run. He lifted his chin toward the distant mountains. We go home. Nayeli blinked. Your village? Kale nodded once. It's time. Ilara's heart pounded. She didn't know what waited there. Judgment, coldness, danger. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. As long as she was with Kyle, she would face it. Even if the whole world was on their heels, the desert seemed endless as Kyle, Ilara, Nayeli, and Rowan moved cautiously toward the distant mountains. Every shadow threatened danger, every gust of wind carried whispers of the past. But now, unlike before, fear mingled with purpose, an unspoken promise that they would survive, together. Ilara's leg throbbed painfully with every step. She tried to keep pace, wrapping a torn piece of cloth around the wound, but her hands shook. Kale noticed and slowed his stride. You don't have to prove anything, he said softly, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting another ambush. She looked up at him, her heart twisting at the intensity in his gaze. I can't keep hiding. I won't. Not anymore. He nodded, understanding that unspoken truth, that the fire in her chest was stronger than any fear. Nayeli and Rowan walked ahead, their senses on high alert. They had all grown closer in the past few days, bound by trials that demanded courage, quick thinking, and trust. Rowan, once timid and fearful, now held his ground, gripping his makeshift weapons with a determined set to his jaw. Nayeli moved like a shadow, always protective, always ready, her arrows deadly and precise. The group paused as the first signs of the mountains appeared. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Kyle exhaled. We're close. The village is just beyond that ridge. Ilara swallowed. Memories of her childhood flashed before her eyes, the laughter of her parents, the scent of fresh bread from her mother's oven, the warmth of a home that had been ripped away too soon. She had feared returning, fearing judgment, fearing the emptiness she might find, but the ache of hope overpowered her fear. They crested the ridge and saw the village. Smoke rose lazily from chimneys. Lanterns flickered in windows, welcoming the night. People moved about, unaware of the danger that had stalked them. Kyle's grip tightened on Ilara's hand. Stay close. They approached cautiously, avoiding the main road. Every step was tense, but nothing, no mercenary, no trap, emerged. Relief and disbelief washed over them like a tide. As they entered the village, whispers began. Curious eyes watched from doorways and windows. But what struck Ilara most wasn't the whispers. It was the recognition. Some faces, older now, still held memories of her. Some, who had once shunned her, looked unsure, hesitant, questioning. Then a voice called out, trembling yet warm, Ilara? She froze. Her mother stepped forward, frail but unbroken, tears glistening in her eyes. She had aged in the years Ilara had been gone, but the love radiating from her was immediate and overpowering. Ilara, Kale said softly, letting go of her hand so she could run. Ilara dropped to her knees and embraced her mother, the world narrowing to that single, perfect moment. She could feel every heartbeat, every sigh of relief. Tears streamed freely, blending joy and sorrow into a single river. Her father appeared beside them, eyes misty but shining with pride. You're home, he said simply. Ilara laughed, the sound breaking through years of fear and silence. I never stopped dreaming about this day. Kyle remained in the background watching her. He smiled softly, a quiet contentment in his heart. He had faced darkness, danger, and despair, but now he saw the true reward: safety, love, and a future worth fighting for. Nayeli and Rowan moved toward the villagers, who had begun to emerge cautiously from their homes. Nayeli nodded to Kyle. "They're good people," she said. "You'll be safe here." Kyle looked around the village, sensing the protective walls and tight-knit community, but his gaze returned to Ilara. "We'll face whatever comes next together," he said. The evening fell. Lanterns cast a golden glow, laughter began to rise, and for the first time in a long while, Ilara felt peace. The horrors of the past still lingered, like shadows in the corners, but the warmth of home, the embrace of family, and the bond she had formed with Kyle turned the shadows into gentle silhouettes. As night deepened, Kyle and Ilara walked together along a quiet path at the edge of the village. The stars mirrored the fires of the village below, glittering like distant promises. "Ilara," Kyle said softly, stopping her. He took both her hands in his. "No matter what happens, I want you to remember something. You are stronger than fear, braver than you believe, and you're never, ever alone." She gazed into his eyes, tears reflecting starlight. I believe you," she whispered. Kyle pulled her into a gentle embrace. Around them, the world was quiet, safe, full of possibilities. And as the night wrapped the village in a gentle embrace, a sense of hope settled over them all. The darkness had come, fierce and unrelenting, but love, courage, and unity had endured. Ilara closed her eyes, leaning into Kyle. For the first time in years she felt whole. And she knew, without doubt, that they would never have to face the world alone again. Morning broke over the village like a soft blessing. Golden sunlight spilled across rooftops, glinting on the dew-covered grass, while birdsong filled the air with a melody that felt almost sacred. The world seemed to exhale, as if it too recognized the triumph of those who had endured. Ilara woke to the gentle warmth of Kale's hand resting on hers. She blinked against the sunlight, the lingering ache of yesterday's journey softened by the serenity around them. She could hear laughter in the village square, a harmony of voices that spoke of life continuing, ordinary, beautiful, unbroken. Kyle smiled when he saw her awake. "Good morning," he said simply, as if no words could capture the depth of what they had survived together. Ilara sat up, stretching. Her legs still throbbed slightly. But the pain was distant compared to the ache she had carried in her heart for years. She glanced around the small cottage her parents had prepared for her, familiar, yet somehow renewed, as if the walls themselves were welcoming her home. "Are you really okay?" she asked, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. Kale nodded. "Better than okay. I'm ready for everything ahead, as long as we face it together." She felt a shiver of emotion run through her, a mixture of relief, love, and awe at how far they had come. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem frightening. It seemed full of possibility. Outside, Nayeli and Rowan were helping the villagers repair a broken fence, laughter echoing across the field. They had all been tested, pushed to their limits, but now their bond had deepened into something permanent: trust, respect, and an unspoken understanding that family wasn't just those who shared blood. Alara's mother approached with a basket of fresh bread, her smile radiant. "You've grown so much," she said softly. "Not just in body, but in spirit. The village has waited for your return, but we never knew you'd come back stronger than we imagined." Ilara hugged her mother tightly. "I couldn't have done it without them," she said, glancing toward Kyle, Nayeli, and Rowan. "They were my strength when I felt I had none." Her father joined them, pride shining in his eyes. "You've brought hope back to this village, Ilara. You've reminded us all what courage looks like." The day passed in quiet joy. Villagers shared stories of the past, laughter mingling with tears. Kyle, Ilara, Nayeli, and Rowan worked side by side with them, rebuilding, planting, and restoring. Every gesture, no matter how small, felt monumental, the promise of a future nurtured by hands that had once trembled in fear. As dusk approached, the village gathered in the central square. Lanterns were strung from trees and rooftops, casting a warm glow across smiling faces. Music began to play, tentative at first, then stronger, as drums and flutes carried a rhythm that spoke of celebration, survival, and unity. Kyle turned to Alara, taking her hands in his once more. "Do you feel it?" he asked. She nodded, tears sparkling in her eyes. "I feel everything. Hope, joy, love, peace. I feel home." He smiled, his forehead resting against hers. "Then we're home. Not just this village, but wherever we are together." The music swelled, and Alara realized she was laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in years. Rowan and Nayeli danced alongside villagers, their joy unrestrained, and the once shadowed streets now gleamed with life and light. Ilara looked around, absorbing every detail, the children chasing each other under the lantern glow, the elders smiling proudly, Kyle's steady presence beside her. She knew the darkness they had endured would always be part of their story, but it was no longer a shadow over their lives. It had shaped them, but it would not define them. Kale whispered, "No matter what comes next, we've built something unbreakable. Love, family, friendship. It's stronger than any fear we've faced." Ilara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "And we'll keep building," she said softly. "Every day, together." As the stars appeared above, the lanterns flickered in harmony with the firelight, casting a golden glow over the village. Music, laughter, and quiet conversations merged into a tapestry of life, a life reclaimed, cherished, and filled with love. In that moment, Ilara understood something profound. Happiness wasn't about the absence of struggle, but the courage to endure it, the strength to rebuild, and the grace to embrace the love that had always been waiting. She looked at Kyle, at Nayeli, at Rowan, at her parents, and then at the villagers who had welcomed her back. A sense of completeness, of belonging filled her chest. The journey had been long, harrowing, and uncertain, but it had led her here, to home, to love, and to the unshakable truth that no darkness could ever overcome the light they carried together. And in that golden starlit village, hearts intertwined, they laughed, they danced, and they lived, finally, fully, and forever free.